Welcome to the lecture series on Environment and Ecology presented by Mentors for IS in association with Bangalore IS Academy and Namak APSC. So in the last video, we had actually started off with functions of an ecosystem under which we had started the discussion about energy flow, where I did mention that we have three concepts under this particular topic, that is energy flow. One is food chain, the other is food web, and finally ecological pyramids. So we have already completed the discussion with respect to food chains and food webs, whereas in this particular video, we will be covering ecological pyramids, that is the third concept under the first function of an ecosystem, that is energy flow. Now, this is actually an important concept under environment and ecology. So I'm pretty sure everybody has some understanding of ecological pyramids. So an ecological pyramid actually refers to a graphical representation designed to show the biomass or bioproductivity at each trophic level in a given ecosystem. So if you now picture a pyramid, the pyramid will always have a larger base which reduces in width as you start moving away from the base, and the pyramid itself may be made up of several blocks. Similar is an ecological pyramid where instead of blocks, the pyramid is made up of bars, where each bar represents a different trophic level and the energy, biomass, or the number of organisms at that particular trophic level. So we have already discussed what a trophic level represents in the previous video. So in the ecological pyramid, each block that you're able to see in this ecological pyramid actually represents either the energy, biomass, or the number of organisms at that particular trophic level. So here I actually want you to remember two things. First, the height of the bar, the height of each bar that you're able to see in the ecological pyramid is always constant, whereas the width, or you could call it the length of the bar, varies with respect to the quantity of the aspect being measured, that is the energy, biomass, or the number of organisms. So in this particular diagram or the image that you're able to see, you should be able to notice that the height of each and every bar is almost constant or the same at each and every level, but the length varies with respect to the quantity being measured. So obviously the primary producers are always larger in number, because of which the lowest level, which we have already discussed earlier at food chain, usually it will always start with the producers. They are always larger in numbers. The second point I want you to remember is that the ecological pyramid will always start with producers. Since the primary producers produce their own food, and with that, our ecological pyramid should always start, and only from there on can you move on to primary consumers, secondary, and finally tertiary consumers. So any food chain that you take, as of today, humans will usually occupy the tertiary or the secondary level. So in any ecological pyramid, humans will always be at the topmost level or at the second most top level in any ecological pyramid. So next what we'll do is we look into the three different types of ecological pyramids. So we have the pyramid of numbers, we have the pyramid of biomass, and finally we have the pyramid of energy. So we will go through each and every category of ecological pyramid, starting with the pyramid of numbers. Okay. The pyramid of numbers represents the number of different organisms that occupies each trophic level without considering the size or biomass at any particular level. So the pyramid of numbers may be an upright pyramid or an inverted pyramid. So we have different types of pyramid of numbers. See, one type is pyramid of numbers. Under pyramid of numbers, we have different types of pyramid of numbers. So we'll first take up that is upright pyramid when it comes to pyramid of numbers. So you should be able to see these diagrams below in this particular slide over here. So the upright pyramid may be seen in a grassland ecosystem, in a pond ecosystem, or a forest ecosystem. So if you take this particular grassland ecosystem over here, the grasses occupy the lowest trophic level because of their abundance. The next level will be occupied by primary consumers such as grasshoppers, where the number of grasshoppers will be less than that of grass. The next level is occupied by frogs or rats, which is less than the number of grasshoppers because frogs feed on grasshoppers. And finally, the next trophic level is occupied by a tertiary consumer such as a hawk or a peacock. So here we see that the number of individuals decreases with every trophic level. Now this is a pyramid of numbers, and therefore we are representing the number of organisms at each trophic level in a food chain. So since the number of organisms decreases as we move on through different trophic levels in a food chain, so here this particular grassland ecosystem has an upright pyramid of numbers. Similar is a pond ecosystem as well as a forest ecosystem. Next we look into an inverted pyramid. So now if you consider a tree ecosystem, here we should be able to see the same pyramid of numbers, but here we have an inverted pyramid. An inverted pyramid of numbers is seen usually in a tree ecosystem where the first trophic level only contains a tree. The next trophic level is occupied by birds which feed on the fruits and are greater in number. The next level is occupied by parasites or even hyperparasites which feed off the birds and hence they are greater in number. So here I want you to remember that when it comes to pyramid of numbers, you may have an upright pyramid or you might even have an inverted pyramid. It is not restricted. Also, you must realize that it is actually difficult to count all the organisms in an ecosystem. Say for example, in this particular diagram that you're able to see in this inverted pyramid, it is actually difficult for us to consider or count the number of herbivores that we have. Even if you're able to count the number of birds in the particular tree, how can you count the number of parasites? Even if you're able to count the number of parasites, how can you count the number of hyperparasites? It is very, very difficult. Therefore, the pyramid of numbers does not represent a complete definition of the structure of an ecosystem. So many of the times, in order to understand the interaction between different organisms in an ecosystem, the pyramid of numbers is never the first choice. The reason being that in the next slide, you should be able to see here, it is not an inverted pyramid, neither is it an upright pyramid. So in the earlier case itself, I told you that whenever you take a tree ecosystem is always an inverted pyramid. But at the same time, if you consider this particular diagram over here, the same tree ecosystem is in the shape of a spindle now. Why? Because we are considering the tree, that is just one in number. Then we move on to the herbivores where we have a number of birds and maybe other insects. Then we are considering the carnivores instead of parasites, where the number of carnivores now starts to decrease. So neither is it an upright pyramid, neither is it an inverted pyramid. At the same time, if we now consider a grassland ecosystem, so in the first case I did mention that a grassland ecosystem is always an upright pyramid. But in this particular case that you take, where I'm considering grass, then the number of rabbits and the number of fleas which are like parasites and which might feed off on rabbits. So in this particular case, it's like you have an upright pyramid, and on top of this upright pyramid, I have an inverted pyramid. So the same grassland ecosystem is no longer an upright pyramid. So considering any ecosystem that you take, within that ecosystem, considering the number of organisms that you take and the specific food chain, the shape of the number of pyramids, the pyramid of numbers might vary, and therefore the pyramid of numbers is not the best option for us to study the interaction between organisms in an ecosystem. So I hope by this the concept of pyramid of numbers is actually clear. Next, we move on to pyramid of biomass, because it is always important that when compared to pyramid of numbers, the pyramid of biomass always gives us a better understanding of the energy contained in each level. The pyramid of biomass is considered to overcome the shortcomings of pyramid of numbers. So here in a pyramid of biomass, we will consider the total weight of all organisms at each trophic level. So when I mention the total weight, I'm actually referring to the total dry weight. So now you might have a doubt, what is dry weight? Dry weight is that weight of biomass by excluding the weight of water in the body. So if you take any organism, for example, if you take a cow, you'll have to only consider the weight of the biomass excluding the water weight in that particular cow or that particular organism. So a pyramid of biomass is usually determined by collecting all organisms occupying each trophic level separately and measuring their dry weight. This overcomes the size difference problem or the number problem because you are only considering the biomass. So here in this particular diagram to your right, you should be able to notice. So I did mention if you consider a tree ecosystem, the tree ecosystem has to be an inverted pyramid. But at the same time, I also mentioned that the same tree ecosystem in a pyramid of numbers, if you consider a different food chain, it might become a spindle. So this kind of problem never arises in a pyramid of biomass. So if we are considering a tree ecosystem, as you can see in the second diagram over here, the same tree ecosystem will always be an upright pyramid. It does not matter what kind of food chain you will consider in a tree ecosystem. If it is a pyramid of biomass, it will always be an upright pyramid. Never will it change with respect to the food chain within that ecosystem. If you take an ecosystem, it will always be an upright pyramid or an inverted pyramid. The shape of the pyramid or the orientation of the pyramid will not change with respect to the food chain within that ecosystem. Therefore, it becomes easier to study the interaction between organisms when it comes to a pyramid of biomass rather than a pyramid of numbers. Okay, so here you should be able to see. Uh, I, I want you to remember here, when it comes to a pyramid of biomass, uh, when you consider a terrestrial ecosystem will always be upright. A terrestrial ecosystem will always have an upright pyramid with the larger base occupied by the primary producers, because obviously the weight of the biomass occupied by the producers will be much larger when you compare it with higher trophic levels. So the number of plants, trees that you have will have more weight than the number of lions which occupies the tertiary or the quaternary level. So that is the reason when it comes to terrestrial ecosystem, please remember the pyramid of biomass is always upright. But if you compare it with an aquatic ecosystem, the lowest level is occupied by either zooplankton or phytoplankton that might grow and reproduce at a rapid rate. But at the topmost level, you'll have whales and sharks which have tremendous weight, because of which an aquatic ecosystem, when it comes to a pyramid of biomass, is always inverted. Please remember this. Terrestrial ecosystem, pyramid of biomass upright. Aquatic ecosystem, pyramid of biomass inverted, because whale sharks will have greater weight in total when compared to the total weight of phytoplankton in an aquatic ecosystem. And unlike the pyramid of numbers, the orientation of the pyramids will not change. Also, please remember, when it comes to biomass, the unit for measuring is grams per meter square or kgs per meter square. Fine. Next, we will consider the pyramid of energy. Now, the pyramid of energy is a pyramid of productivity which depicts the flow of energy through the food chain. Since the pyramid of energy depicts the flow of energy and the laws of thermodynamics says that there will always be loss of energy at each level of transfer, the pyramid of energy will always be an upright pyramid. So in the last video, we did discuss the 10% law. I did tell you that as we move from one trophic level to another trophic level, the amount of energy which is available to the next trophic level is only 10% of the amount of energy, and therefore the amount of energy available for organisms reduces from one trophic level to another trophic level. We have already discussed this in the previous video. So since the same 10% law applies over here and the amount of energy reduces as we move from one trophic level to another trophic level, a pyramid of energy is always upright and it always depicts the productivity within that ecosystem. So since the pyramid of energy is always upright and it will always follow the 10% law, the best way to study the interaction between organisms in an ecosystem and a food chain is always the pyramid of energy when compared to both pyramid of biomass and pyramid of numbers. One last point over here, I just wanted to mention that the pyramid of energy also helps us to explain the concept of biological magnification or biomagnification, since there's a tendency for toxic substances to increase in concentration as we move progressively with higher trophic levels. So this concept of biomagnification, I'll be covering it, I'll be explaining it in the next video, but I just want you to remember this concept of pyramid of energy when we move on to biomagnification. Okay, so I did tell you that the pyramid of energy is more advantageous when compared to the other two pyramids. So the reason being that there are no inverted pyramids. Obviously the shape of the pyramid, neither the orientation of the pyramid changes. Different ecosystems can be easily compared because it does not change in shape, neither does it change in orientation. Also it takes into account the rate of productivity. Therefore the pyramid of energy is the best option to study an ecosystem and the interaction of organisms within that. So you can just pause this video over here and just use this image to compare the different types of pyramids that you may have. Okay, so a question for revision. The question says an inverted pyramid of number and an inverted pyramid of biomass are respectively seen in. Okay, so you have a grassland and tree ecosystem, sea and tree ecosystem, tree and sea ecosystem, and finally the last option is sea and grassland ecosystem. Now, I did tell you that when it comes to a pyramid of number, the shape or the orientation of the pyramid changes, but always remember that generally we would say a grassland ecosystem, a forest ecosystem, or a pond ecosystem is always upright, but when it comes to tree ecosystem it is inverted. That is the general case. So a tree ecosystem when it comes to pyramid of numbers is always inverted, and the sea ecosystem in a pyramid of biomass, it will be inverted as well. That also we have covered in this particular video. Therefore the option or the correct answer is C. So I hope this particular concept of ecological pyramids is clear. All these things under environment and ecology is nothing but revision. I'm pretty sure all these things would have been covered under biology when in school or college. However, if you do have any doubts, please do write to us in the comment section. Thank you.